Hi everyone, welcome along to DigiShift 72, Small Charities, Big Impact, Why Digital Fundraising is Key. So we're going to be talking today about something that's probably on everyone's minds at the moment as everyone's financially squeezed, is where do you go next with your digital fundraising strategy? According to the Charity Digital Skills Report 2023, almost 2/3 of small charities want to improve their online fundraising. That's been quite a significant increase from 49% last year. The report also found that more than half of small charities say they're poor at digital fundraising, which again has been an increase. So there's a growing need to improve digital fundraising skills, and particularly that technology's moved at such pace. How do we make those changes? What does that need to look like? So today we're going to cover some of the latest trends in digital fundraising, how to create effective digital fundraising campaigns. We're going to look at measurement of success and how to choose the right platforms and tools. And we've got two great speakers with us today. So we've got Neil Mehta, who's the Chief Exec at Givey, and Lauren Galvani, who's Senior Customer Development Manager at Beacon CRM. And as always, we've got everyone else in the room. We've got some fundraising experts in the room today, and we've got lots of people interested in chatting a bit further about this. So I'm going to hand over to Lauren at Beacon CRM first of all, and then we'll hear from Neil, and then we'll get a chance to discuss all of this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much all for having me. Everything that I pretty much have to offer today comes straight from the minds and the insight of some really incredible fundraisers. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be kind of chatting with all of you today and be able to share some more ideas around it. So I work for an organisation called Beacon CRM, and we exist solely to support the third sector. And so I'm really lucky because in my job, every single day, I get to speak to wonderful charities and hear firsthand about the trends that are going on in the sector, what the challenges are that they're facing, what they're kind of focusing on when it comes to fundraising. And then all of those conversations kind of influence what we're doing here at Beacon and what we're building to provide a platform that can kind of accessibly support charities with those aims. And so I personally started working for Beacon at the beginning of 2021. So back when all my colleagues were torsos and we didn't have this lovely bunting. And it was kind of really right after the peak of the pandemic. And, you know, the charities that we were speaking to were a lot of them really having to rethink the way in which they were operating, as I'm sure you all know. So a lot of charities, smaller charities that we work with, perhaps previously very community-based, having to kind of find ways to shift into this online world. And I think although, of course, naturally, there's a lot of challenges that come with that, a lot of the charities that we work with have also seen a lot of benefits to that. So things like capturing personal information, as engagement is starting to shift digitally, suddenly becomes a lot more easier and accessible than it was perhaps previously. So, you know, me as a donor, I can simply check a box if I want to opt into gift aid or, you know, hear about more things through a newsletter whilst I'm donating, rather than say, you know, we're out in the field and I've got to fill out, you know, an entirely separate manual form. And actually, although we've got all of this kind of digital capability now, it doesn't actually mean we're kind of doing away entirely with that in-person engagement. Things like your standard street fundraising, your community events can still be supported by the digital capabilities, because there's a lot more kind of mobile friendly technology out there now that's accessible to smaller charities and can still enable a lot of that data capture out in your community if that's still kind of what works for you as an organization. But I guess if we kind of fast forward a couple of years and probably honestly thousands of conversations with different charities later, and a lot more charities kind of on board with the importance of digital fundraising and the opportunities, I thought it would be worth just kind of sharing a couple of the key things that we hear basically invariably on every kind of call that we have with charities. And the first is that they still have a real desire to be able to better understand their current donor base. So when we're talking to people about what they're kind of wanting to do in the fundraising space, this is still just such a key pillar, so that as they are looking to scale, digitally or otherwise, they can still ensure that those relationships still feel just as personal as they have always done. And actually understanding your donors means that when you are engaging, whatever method that is, that communication is always going to be tailored and your people aren't going to feel, you know, lost within a supporter base. But then on the other side, also having that insight means that as you are looking to venture into digital, you can make sure that you're actually spending that insight into the right places. So I think it can be quite easy to say, you know, this is what everyone else seems to be doing. TikTok's popping off. Everyone's loving Twitter or whatever it's called these days. So let's jump on that. But actually, there's a lot of value in sometimes just slowing down and having a look at the data and insight that you do have available within your organization and figuring out what works for you. So, you know, who are the people that currently support, have been supporting? what are they like, what do they like, what engages them, and then starting to think about, well, how can we find more of those people? Where might they be hanging out in an online capacity? What platforms do they already exist in, so you can kind of meet them where they are? And likewise, for the people who maybe don't support, who are you not attracting? Maybe it's because they're less connected to the cause, or maybe it's just because they're not aware. So again, thinking about who are those people that you actually want to be able to bring into your organization and form a connection with. Where might they be hanging out online? What kind of platforms are they using? And then actually being able to kind of test out some of those ideas, whether that's, you know, trying out a new email campaign, or we're going to post something on LinkedIn, meet your supporters where they are. And then really importantly, have that ability to see what is working well, what is repeatable, and then you can use that data, use that insight to kind of iterate and make sure that your time, which is super, super valuable, is actually being spent in the right places. And the second thing kind of tying into that then is around a lot of the charities that we speak to really want to be able to kind of increase their brand awareness and increase the diversification of their different income streams. So in a world where we can now see that, you know, people are finding that the cost of living crisis is making it harder to donate. Of course, people are having to be more selective over what support they can give. There's even more pressure there to be able to kind of articulate impact and attract the right kinds of audiences and find the space within the sector that is you know, your people that are going to be engaged with the cause and be able to support you. And I think the benefit to digital fundraising is you've actually got a fairly low risk way to try out a variety of different things, and again kind of see what works over time. So if you think about, you know, the cost of, say, putting on an entire event or having loads of brochures printed, the risk of resource there can be far greater than saying, actually, let's try posting up on this new Facebook group that we found, or let's try running an online webinar that we think will appeal to this demographic we'd quite like to engage with. And, you know, that is something that is lower risk. You can see how it works, and then again, kind of iterate those things over time. So I think, yeah, those are a couple of really key things that we've heard from charities, particularly in the last couple of years. And I think the main thing from my perspective is that when it comes to digital fundraising, there is such a plethora of options available and so many new things that people are trying, but it doesn't have to be complicated and it doesn't have to be a massive drain on resource. Whilst it's really beneficial to explore and evaluate all of the different fun tools that are available and, you know, AI this and automation that, actually to start with, it can be a case of, you know, a simple opportunity to evaluate your data that you have, dip your toe in, try out some different things, so that you can find people you may not have crossed paths with previously, use your actual data to measure the success of that, see what works, and actually just kind of have fun with it. That's all from me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lauren. John.
So we're just saying thank you very much. Would it make sense to go straight to Neil just now and then do questions all together? Is everybody comfortable if we did that? Willie's asked a question in chat about links, and we'll pop some links in as we go, just a few guides and more context about the speakers. But I think we'll pass over to Neil now, if that's all right with you, and we'll get going with the next quick talk.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Neil Mehta. Thanks, Lauren. You are doing what we are at the front end in terms of raising the money through the donations platform, and very much the area that I want to talk about specifically is small charities specifically, and focus on digital in particular from that point of view. Just context, we at Givey have been born out of lockdown, and we have raised about just under £4 million for over 5,000 small charities, under $500,000 in UK. We are totally UK focused. We are the last people standing at the moment, with obviously Virgin Donate and BT My Donate and Small Charities Coalition and so forth have unfortunately, you know, are gone. And I think what I want to really reflect is, how are we surviving, basically, or whatever. And I think the other side is that I actually also am a trustee of a social enterprise and chair of a small international NGO. So hopefully we can talk about a lot more pithy in terms of practicalities or whatever. So I've got a very quick run through some slides, basically, in terms of what we found in our journey so far supporting small charities. So if I just share my screen, the presentation, then hopefully all the technology works. Hopefully, John.
That's fine, Neil. Yeah, do that. Thank you.
I'm going to zip through this because a lot of it Ross and John have covered in some of the reports that have come out from Charity Digital and third sector and so forth. So I'll try to just summarize things and just get down to the tactics, if you like, in terms of the digital fundraising. We know all the issues are happening in terms of the tensions and all the government funding that's being cut, etc., whatever. But I think the impact on small charities is huge. I think like forecast is something like 30% potentially is in danger of actually closing and so forth. So yeah, we're going through quite a tough time, I think, in UK. I think Ross has covered some of this, but just to kind of give a quick header in terms of how the donations are happening and what generation are looking at how they are donating. And I think Lauren touched on some of those things or whatever in terms of mobile being one of the key kind of elements within that, and the ease of kind of frictionless donations and how that happens across different payment platforms and so forth. And then they got all these, I get lost in all these generation X and Ys and so forth. So it's kind of defined it that really that certain audiences, what kind of areas that they are supporting now. So like, for example, Generation X, so-called, is more overseas aid and disaster relief. And then if you look at the younger Z, is more homeless shelters and etc., whatever, and more mobile driven. So that, I think that's one. I'll talk about the AI and chat GPT and so forth a bit further, because I think again, I think that's another exaggeration of how that could be utilized by small charities. But there are some practical steps that can be done that saves a lot of money and time, because obviously most of the small charities are volunteer led. Just to, again, scope that this is no different to England and Wales, that majority of all funds digitally or corporate or government goes to probably the top, 10% of charities in UK. And we are totally the opposite. So we focus on what is defined here, which is I call them the forgotten 95%, basically. So we are very much focused on community-driven small charities, and I suppose volunteer-led in terms of scout groups, PTAs, faith-based groups, and so forth, which are, if you call them micro charities or micro volunteer organisations. So I've got some examples of some of the Scottish charities that we've done some good work for at the end. Some of the, again, just data points. I'm not going to go through these old numbers that are in the media, in the charity digital reports, third sector, etc., social enterprise. These are all the things that are all talking about digital, but I want to try to kind of demystify digital in the context of our discussion today. So these are some of the things that are critical, but I think from a practical point of view, a lot of the small charities would find this very difficult to do across all of these things. So I think, as Lauren said as well, is that you've got to pick your kind of strengths in terms of what you can do with the resources you've got. This is the ideal scenario in terms of how you look at data analytics. Is probably the most difficult area for small charities to, unless you've got somebody who's a trustee, maybe, that you have on board from that point of view. Technology, again, we've talked about the CRM systems, and there is all kinds of Microsoft Office and so forth, or whatever. From my perspective, I'm specifically just targeting how do you get donations? How do you actually get donations, which is least technology-based, frictionless, if you like, and is easy to tell your stories, basically. So there is this marketing element that no one talks about, which small charities find very, very difficult to do because they do not have the deep pockets of spending water aids, spending on television advertising at £2 per month donations. It's not the world that we live in, basically, from a small charities point of view. Okay, get into the nitty-gritty of kind of looking at. There is a plethora of platforms still out there. From our perspective, we are totally transparent in what we do in terms of fees and so forth, and I'm not trying to sell here or whatever, but 100% of a donation goes, including gift aid, goes to the charity, and the donor pays. On our platform, our average donation is about £40. For every one fundraiser, we raise 10 donations, and at least 1.2 or one extra donor eventually comes and donates again to the similar clauses or whatever. We've got over 100,000 donors now on our platform as well. And Charity Digital have voted us most money going to charities, etc., whatever. So that's that. So what is the checklist? I think you need to look at, look at the donor base of some of the platforms. That's sometimes difficult to find, but I think that's one area that you should look at or whatever. Should look at fees, as I just mentioned. I don't think all the platforms out there are totally transparent. So you need to understand whether they're charging service fees or, donor fees. Are they charging fees on gift aid, etc., whatever. Types of donations, again, I talked about, you want an easy, frictionless, whether you want to donate with PayPal, or Apple, or direct debit, or etc., whatever. You just don't want to be thinking about how to do that or whatever. The platform should be able to just let that happen. Ease of use, actually. Again, we are very tailored towards making sure that it's not technology. It's more about, for example, if it's a fundraiser, they've got, when they put up a fundraising page or whatever, they can communicate to their donor base and their journey. They can put up their pictures of saying, this is my training I'm doing and so forth. So there's a messaging service already within the platform, if you see what I mean. If they want a donate button, you don't have to go to a technical person to say, oh, how do I do that or whatever. We've got these tools out of the box. You just get a donate button piece of code and put it on any piece of content, and people can donate or whatever. QR codes, again, demystifying some of these things or whatever, and not having a huge technical team or having people that majority of small charities don't, is very important. I think integration is always a difficult one. We don't get into as a platform into that side because there's so many CRM systems. It depends on who's using what CRM systems, what kind of websites, what technologies, etc. So we are literally a solution in a box for fundraising specifically. Security goes without saying. A lot of security, cyber attacks stuff out there. So you just need to ensure that the platform is all SSL or whatever technical stuff is all guaranteed and then part of the package. Next, just keep it really simple. This is some examples. Again, small charities, small is beautiful. These are some of the examples and some of the things that they did. So I think what I would say is, I think in terms of takeaways would be, you need to find a platform where you can storytell your whatever content you've got, and they are out of the box with giving you the ability to do that, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a blog, whether it's it's not just the fundraiser. And secondly, I think it's got to be really clear what we call it incentive, but what is for a pound, what the impact you make. So that's one of the things that a lot of small charities sometimes don't do. So if it's £5 gets us, a school bag, £100 gets a refugee in English classes or whatever. Those kind of clarity is really important, that sometimes is forgotten. And I think the only other thing was use of the social networks. So we are very, very strong. We do not spend any money on advertising ourselves. We are volunteer-led, with 2 employees. The rest are volunteers, students, interns, career break women come and support us to support the charities. And we are very, very strong on social media. We've got a lot of students who promote the charities that we are raising funds for, basically. So I think these are kind of things that you need to look out for in some of the platforms out there. And I think I'll share kind of video links and so forth to us as and when on some of these projects that we've done and support. And I think that's it, I think, from my point of view. I'll stop there. Is that okay, John? Yeah.
Thanks very much, Neil. Loads of really useful ideas and starting points there. I've got a couple of questions in chat, which I'll come to in a second, but maybe one I want to put back to both of you, perhaps Lauren first, is if you're in a small organization, or really tiny organizations that's not done any fundraising before, where would be a good kind of starting point? I suppose I'm imagining it might be, is it getting a basic donation mechanism up and running, or is it about some kind of campaign? What would be a really good kind of next step to try if somebody was just getting going with digital fundraising?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely having that kind of mechanism and platform in place to obviously enable that is the first starting point. And I think, for a kind of low risk outcome, then trying platforms that are very off the shelf for that. I would say, although it's hard to kind of be able to look at existing data sometimes, if it's kind of living in lots of different places and spreadsheets, there is still an amount of insight that you will be able to establish for that. So I think kind of, as I was saying earlier, kind of looking at what you're doing right now, and either look to a campaign that is going to reach more of those people. So, perhaps posting a success story because you found that a lot of your supporters fit a demographic who are likely to be on Facebook pages. Try that out. Try some informative content with, a link through to an online donation platform that you perhaps haven't been able to provide people before. And then if you're able to choose a tool like, Neil was saying with the Givey platform, or if you get into the world of like CRMs who've got donation capabilities, you can then start to actually track the responses back from that and go, well, how did that go? How much time, effort, and money did that cost us? And what did we see back as a result? And I think just starting somewhere like that can just kind of kick things off, really.
Great. Did you want to add anything more on that, Neil?
Yeah, I think the smaller you are, the less likely you are going to have funds to have CRM systems and so forth, whatever, because they are very valuable, without shadow of a doubt. But I think as a small charity, if you are, for sake of argument, under 100K a year turnover, you're very, very unlikely to be able to afford a lot of the things that that we have just kind of described, or whatever, how to track, keep a hold of the donors, and how do you manage and account manage them and make sure that you have a relationship with them. You need CRM systems. That's the best way to do it. But for a small charity, I think the first thing they've got to do is survival. So it's kind of funds. Can they raise funds? And without shadow of a doubt, through the lockdown and now, digital is the best and most effective way of doing it. So yeah, getting up a fundraising page, and you might not even have a website, potentially. You might just have a Facebook account. That's good enough, in terms of the way we built what we've built. So, out of the box, it's free. Everything is there. and you just get going, raise funds. And then we've seen an evolution in some of the charities. We've done some work through the lockdown. One of the schools, inner city schools, basically, through the lockdown, it was very, very good for the government to say, look, you can, here is work from home or whatever, but a lot of them didn't even have equipment. So it's fine, they have internet, but they didn't have a laptop. They didn't have there's a school called Highgate. They raised about £100,000 just out of the blue to say, look, we just want to buy equipment or whatever. So I think it really depends on the capability of the smaller the charity, the trustees are actually the volunteers and they are doing the activities. So they themselves are time poor, tech poor. They've got technology or whatever, but they can. You want a what do you call it? A deviceless. You don't want to worry about whether it's an Apple or this mobile or Samsung. So we don't. That you just kind of level the playing field basically. None of that matters. You've got something that you can actually work with or whatever. So I would say the smaller you are, the more important it is for you to just get going, to get funding in, and then that gives you the ability then to start building some kind of capability of saying, okay, well, let's have one of the charities I joined as trustee, they didn't even have office, for example, or whatever, so you've got some basics that you will have to go through, and obviously there are funds out there for those things that you can get from tech for good government departments and so forth. So I think it's just that kind of thing. Charity excellence.
Conscious of time, Neil, we probably need to come on to some other questions. I don't know if there was another one there, John, that you want to pick up.
Well, so Rebs has a couple of points. You have a query on fundraising community, and also a really good point about social media. I wonder, Rebs, if you wanted to say a bit more on that, or are you happy for me to just kind of pick up the points as you've made them there?
Either is fine.
Great.
Well, I had a question just about I love both presentations, by the way, they were great, and also the stats and the Givey one, Neil. I'd be really interested to know where some of those stats, like what the source of those stats are. Like I can like, if you don't have them right now, like maybe I could send you my email or something. You could.
Yeah. I mean, I think these are all reports Ross has mentioned, John has mentioned, but I've these are third, second. I've got the PDFs, and
I'd just be really interested. Like I'd just be where they come from, basically. So I can
absolutely
shamelessly steal them. Disclosure.
Great point about social media as well, Rebs. Do you want to say a bit more about that? Just
I mean, I think in terms of social media, I think like what you were saying about the brand and about getting a good, decent online presence is super important. I think unless you've got your house in order and you've got decent, you've got your brand kind of set up right, like you're gonna struggle to then go move on and ask for money. If you haven't done that first piece of work where people are kind of clear on what your mission is, what your organization does, even just basic stuff like logos and brand presence and all that kind of stuff, it really does make a huge difference. And one of the top tips I put in the chat in terms of like kind of making sure your brand presence is like spot on a shoestring, because I know a lot of charities on this call are not maybe going to have like a communications team or like even more than a couple of members of staff. One thing that you could do is apply for Canva Pro. So you can get Canva Pro for free as a charity. I'm sure there are lots of other things out there as well. It's just the one that I tend to always recommend to people because it's great. It's basically like a graphic design tool for people that have no graphic design experience. And it's really, really good from that perspective. It can help you to make, like decent social media content, as well as like print stuff and presentations and really everything you could possibly need. I really should just be sponsored by Canva because I say this in pretty much everything that I'm in. But yeah, that was just one wee thing that I wanted to say.
Thank you. I wonder if I can ask another like general question to both Lauren and Neil, and then we'll pick up the points about the Charity Excellence Framework. So my general question is, I suppose it's the digital fundraiser's dilemma, which is, do you do everything just in case somebody wants a particular way to donate or do you invest your efforts and say we're going to make one type of transaction really good and really easy? I suppose I'm thinking about things like, say, PayPal or just giving. Like the thought might be, oh, if a donor is already familiar with that, they might expect it and might say, oh, I'd really like to be able to donate in that way. But obviously there's potentially dozens of channels. So I suppose what I'm thinking about is, you're a small organization, you've probably not got a full-time person on this. Do you start by just really being focused and making one thing work really well and learning from that? Or is it about doing a bit of everything or a bit of several things?
I can only talk from a donations point of view and a single point of contact. So Givey, we've invested a lot in technology in the sense that from a payment point of view, actually you can use whatever payment. So you might have a small charity that says, well, we will have a PayPal, or we'll have, CAF, or we'll have whatever. From our point of view, it's like saying, no, it doesn't matter. We use Stripe, and basically Stripe aggregates whatever your credit card is, MasterCard, whatever, PayPal, Apple Pay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So from a user donor point of view, it actually doesn't matter what it is that they do. From a charity point of view, a small charity or whatever, they don't have to go through all the kind of different payment gateways that they have to somehow do, or pick one. So if you only have PayPal or whatever, then okay, then somebody says, well, I've got a debit card, or I've got whatever. So that's practicality. What I'm talking about, frictionless donations. So I think that's probably the answer from looking at it always as a user. So if I'm a fundraiser, I'm looking at it, how do I actually make it totally frictionless? We talked about social media again. You might only know Facebook or whatever, because actually majority of the small charities are run by not millennials, they're older people. They're more used to kind of have Facebook and so forth, might not be used to Instagram or whatever, So if you're actually promoting your fundraiser or whatever, the key platforms are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which is where you get all your donors from. So we know some of those things that you're kind of demystifying, that you don't have to think about, okay, we got one piece of content or whatever. So you will see one of the rural community one that was on the case study that we had, a volunteer organization taking elderly people to hospitals and so forth. They literally started as in the lockdown, and then and we then had a podcast and we had a blog and whatever. So you're taking one piece of content and you're really maximizing, but not worrying about, okay, how do I actually, and actually talking about that. Obviously, one of the key elements I think me and Ross were talking about is ChatGPT. I think
maybe before we pick that one up, Neil, can I just check if Lauren wants to come in on there, because that basic question,
great. I'll
just to make sure we're kind of sharing the space. Go for it, Lauren.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because if I was talking to a brand new charity who is starting out, from where we've spoken to charities who are still considered to be small charities, they don't have a huge amount of resource for administration. They're wanting to kind of grow their presence, and they are wanting to kind of get a little bit more efficient, a bit more modern in the way they're handling things. They are invariably trying to consolidate the different platforms that they have. So most of the charities that we speak to will come to us and say, we've got donations coming through CAF, some Just Giving, we've got some standing orders over here. And actually then part of their problem is, how do I start to bring all of that data together and actually like the administration behind it? So I think it's important that there's tools out there that can handle that, so that you're not being completely exclusive, because the online world is quite frankly not accessible to everyone, though it is becoming more and more the majority. I think so then for a new charity starting out, absolutely thinking about like the right tool for the right job, and trying to pick one or two key platforms that are going to work well in terms of payment processing. But I do think it's worth also considering, is that going to be exclusive to any types of donors that we still want to be able to work with, and what's the backup mechanism to be able to still support those people? So not to say, we're going to actively promote standing orders as we perhaps have done in the past with our bank details on the website. We would actively encourage kind of moving away from that kind of world, but at the same time still giving a bit of consideration to like how would those anomalies, they should be anomalies, be managed. And sometimes it is actually a case of right tool for the job. So like online donations, absolutely a donation platform or a CRM with a donation platform integrated into it that's designed for, you know, small starter charities. But also if you were going to look at perhaps having an online shop presence, then you'd be better serviced by something like Shopify or WooCommerce, and that, you know, that kind of stuff can bring in. So yeah, there is a thing about right tool for the right job, but consolidation as much as possible definitely will see a time saving for you as a charity starting out.
Great, thank you. So what we might do now, because we've got a different great question in chat, is put that straight to you, Lauren, and then back to Neil, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, Jane had a great question about where would you go to for guidance on governance of fundraising? So any resources you might point people to about making sure they're doing fundraising in the right way. What would be your go-to on that if you had one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, the majority of what we kind of look at comes from the charities that we work with directly. So in terms of kind of information that we can share, we've got some amazing case studies with different charities who've kind of shared how they've used online and different digital technologies to kind of enhance what they're doing. And also some of the partners that we work with have some amazing resources. And we've also got some kind of great guides and things. So yeah, I can definitely share some stuff afterwards.
Great. And have you any other points on that one, Neil, about where people?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Charity Digital, the organization, media organization, they have lots of kind of again blogs and good to do good guides, etc. I mentioned earlier a free resources, Charity Excellence. Ian, I know Ian quite well. He's got a free resource that actually you can do. He's got everything, grants and all that, and his free resource. Again, I'll share some of these links or whatever. And obviously the fundraising, again, online fundraising and fraternity or paternity, as I call it, then they're another source or whatever. I think it's important from a small charity's point of view that they are clear in some of the kind of compliance issues that obviously are coming through from the Charities Commission in terms of security and kind of use of social media and so forth. So just keeping an eye on that. Personally, as a small charity trustee as well myself, it's very, very difficult to kind of implement some of the things they're talking about because, again, resource is one of the challenges or whatever. So yeah, I think from a fundraising point of view, I think, yeah, kind of having some demarcations on what you can do and can't do is a good thing. Actually, as more important, what you don't do is probably the most important thing.
Can you give a quick example of what to avoid? What would be your number one pitfall to say, make sure you don't do this if somebody's just getting started?
I think you just need to have some clear guidance and again, that's driven by the trustees from a small charity point of view. So having some clear expertise on that side is quite important. One of the charities I chair or whatever, it took us 3 years to find somebody from digital kind of marketing background to come join as a trustee. That was quite painful or whatever, but until we had that, again, that is the kind of thing, or from a governance point of view, again, basically. So it's that mix of skills that you might have to get proactively find as a small charity, because it's very easy to just have people that you just know, basically, but actually it's important that you just go outside the box in terms of the different skills that you might need, and they help to at least set some guidelines for you, because otherwise it's very difficult, because everything else costs you money, basically, or whatever, to go to a lawyer charity to say, okay, what do we do here, and then you get a whole list of what you do, and as a small charity, that's useless to you. You want to distinctly these 2-3 things you need to just be aware of, basically.
There was a good question, John, came in about LinkedIn for fundraising. I was just wondering, maybe Lauren, Neil, if you'd give us a just I guess one thought or one big bit of advice for LinkedIn as a fundraiser.
Small charities, LinkedIn, no. For fundraising.
Why
big
no?
Big charities, maybe yes. it's simple. Small charities is not, LinkedIn is not the platform, unless we've got audience here. They can comment on that or whatever, whether they use it and what do they use it for.
I'd be interested to hear others' thoughts on
No,
that. Lauren,
I'll be interested.
I just wanted to keep us back because I'd asked that question about the kind of big pitfall. I suppose for me, it's been a little while since I did digital fundraising, but I think for me, the big one to think of is permission to contact. If you're making contact with people and making a financial ask, you need to make sure that you've got the permission to do that. And that's something where something like a CRM is helpful because you can keep track of that. So you can say, right, Ross signed up on our website, and when Ross signed up, he saw that as well as getting general contact, he was also going to be getting information about the working ways to support it. I mean, that's a bit of I think because we're some years on from GDPR now, so that feels like something that medium-sized charities have got a handle on. But I think in community groups, it can be a challenge because you might have people that you're just in contact with because they've done your activities as well. But it's really important to have a handle on that. And also then when you're storing people's contact data, it's about having some assurance and confidence with that as well. And I would think, most good platforms will have tools and processes to help you do that well. But that's a good one to keep at the back of your mind, particularly as you get started for the first time, because often you'll maybe have some contact list from somewhere you need to have real confidence about what's the status of that list and what have those people signed up for. Rebs is a slightly different view on LinkedIn. I think that's a fair one. And I think it's good, Rebs, to make that connection on kind of corporate and in-kind connection, because you might find that people, they have their professional networks on there. So that might be a way of kind of translating that into other types of support as well. But a really interesting discussion on that one.
Can we bring Lauren's thoughts on that one? I'd be really interested to
hear. Yeah, go for it, Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested to hear it from both sides, really, because it certainly isn't something that we hear from charities saying, we really need to be able to track our relationships with people on LinkedIn, although that is a question that comes up more and more often. It's like, do you integrate with LinkedIn? And so, yeah, there's a feeling that people are wanting to start to step more into it. I'm actually kind of coming at it from thinking back as in my more corporate career days. So many more and more corporate organizations, I think, like someone said in the chat here about sort of like volunteer recruitment, so many more organizations there is a corporate social responsibility now. So actually in my feed, obviously I'm in the charity sector, but even with my old connections, I am seeing more and more posts about charity activity. So perhaps, although it's not maybe the platform to get your individual giving program really ramping quickly, it feels like it could be a really beneficial perspective from actually like raising brand awareness through corporates who might want to kind of connect with the cause.
Great, thank you. It's a slightly adjacent comment, but there's a good one from Susan giving Lead Scotland a plug there on accessible communication. And I think that's a really important point to emphasize in fundraising communications, is you've got to make it possible for everyone to interact with what you're sharing. And to show how old I am, I used to do paper-based fundraising. We used to talk there about making forms big enough for people to fill in, so making sure they're not like tiny print. And I think the same principles apply in digital. If you're sharing a link to a donation page, make sure that's going to be accessible and clickable, and make sure people are having a good experience all the way through, because I think Neil mentioned earlier that idea of a kind of frictionless experience. So most of us have probably bought stuff online, and you find that's becoming a very straightforward process now, where companies have spent a lot of time and effort to give people an easy process. And I think it's the same with fundraising now, because probably most people will be accessing your content on a mobile device. So you need to make sure that somebody sees a brilliant call to action. Are they then going to be able to complete the donation process in an easy way on the same device? Because if they can't, it's pretty likely that they won't. So that maybe feels like a bit of a high bar to meet if you're a small organization, but a lot of tools will help you do that. And I think Neil mentioned Stripe there as an example where if that's on your website and your website's mobile friendly, it will work in a good straightforward way. Are there any other questions? We've kind of hopped about quite a few interesting topics just here. So we covered LinkedIn as a possible starting point or possibly not. I wonder, yeah, and Rebs has just highlighted mobile first is absolutely key. Do you want to say a bit more about in-platform features there? Because I think that's a very good point, but some people might not know quite what that means.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of in-platform features, I'd mainly be referring to Facebook and Instagram donation features. I'd say that they're really, really important. But I think that the first step is getting your house in order, getting your decent brand presence before you start asking for money, basically. But once you've done that first step, but yeah, by all means, there's lots of features that you can use on Facebook and Instagram. You know, people can set up Facebook fundraisers for you, for example. You could potentially go down the route of Facebook challenges, which takes a little bit more work and maybe potentially might not be something that small charities will have the capacity to kind of take on, but it's certainly worth looking into, maybe as something for the future. But certainly like donation buttons on your posts, you know, doing lives that have the donation button on them, all of that kind of stuff. Encouraging people to set up birthday fundraisers is another really kind of low-hanging fruit that isn't going to cost you a lot of money or a lot of resource, because basically, for example, when I was at Friends of the Earth, where John used to work, we got at the same time, but we created like a guide for digital fundraising, which specifically had like how to set up a birthday fundraiser, you know, and all that kind of stuff, so that it was super straightforward for supporters to do, and maybe something that supporters hadn't thought about doing, but a really, really straightforward, easy, low-hanging fruit win, if that makes sense. TikTok also has donation features as well, if that's an app that you use. You might not, but yeah, I'd say Facebook and Instagram are two really good ones, and obviously on stories on Instagram. And you could even have something on your bio could be a link to your donation, you know, your donation functionality. So yeah, that I don't feel like I've been very what's the word, making a lot of sense.
No, it's made
total sense.
Thanks, Rebs. It's been really helpful. Thanks for unpacking that for us. Jennifer, you made a great point about consistency and not expecting a kind of overnight success. And I wondered if you had a bit more direct experience you wanted to share. Was that more of a kind of general point?
Well, this last year I've been working for the National Piping Centre and starting from a very base level in their fundraising kind of thing. So we had Piping Live last month. So we ran an individual donation campaign, and that all based through the fact that we provide 50% of your performances free. So through the festival running that, but we put out a newsletter, which was that nearly 6 weeks after the festival last week, and that brought in another £100. So it did. So anytime we've been sharing videos of our free content, because we did quite a lot of digital through the Piping Centre. We've got a YouTube channel. We're very lucky with good resource to funnel into that. But I've been getting our marketing folk to put in just as Reb says, the link in every single time, and it was a slow burn, but I would say the last few weeks, like folk who were at the festival spent their money there are now coming back like to support it again. So yeah, just keep posting and reminding folk that you're a charity, why you're doing it, you know, and that you need the support. It takes a few attempts to get them to press the button.
That's great, Jeff. That's a really good point, because I guess it's two things. So part of it is each individual activity might have quite a small response, but it does add up. And then the other one is not everybody will see or be in a position to support the first time they see something. So coming back with it multiple times is a really useful practice. And I think that ties back to Lauren, your point. And maybe, I don't know, Lauren, if you want to say anything more about, you know, how you might look at testing or tracking stuff over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of supporter journey piece is so key. Like, that's the other two words that I will probably not go a day of my life without hearing now, which is lovely. But it's super important to make sure that, I guess, as a charity, you can actually kind of start to see that journey that you're taking people through. And like you say, Jennifer, like, where are we reaching out at different touch points? What kind of formula almost is appearing to work well for us. Because I think sometimes there's that fear of like, well, we don't want to keep spamming people, but exactly like you said, if I read your email on a Tuesday when I'm just getting onto the tube, I'm like, oh, I really want to donate, but I can't because I'm on a tube, or maybe I'm waiting for payday or what have you. So actually figuring out like what's a good repetition to go for, and what are the trigger points that we say, all right, this thing has happened, this feels like a good opportunity to reach out to that person or that group of people. So an example we always give people when we're showing them the Beacon platform, which sounds super scary, but as an organization, we've got plans that work for teeny tiny charities that are one user, and plans that work for 50, 60 person organizations, and make sure that the value equates, so you've got the right features at different levels as you scale. But even on a really basic level, if you can just start to get a bit of a feel for your data, being able to go, okay, well, here's a list of everyone who's donated a couple of times in maybe 5 months. Would they be open to a recurring subscription perhaps? And then that's a more regular guaranteed opportunity that you've got there just by being able to have noticed that. And also similarly, who are the people who've donated, but for some reason we don't have a gift aid declaration? And then there's another 10% that you could have got. So just finding those little bits of opportunities that are kind of hidden in your data, being able to say, this income came through Facebook, this income came from people who'd already gone to events, and you can just start to kind of make those little correlations. That's the word I can never remember. There we go. Correlations. And yeah, it doesn't have to be, using these big scary analytics tools to do that, I think.
Great. Lauren, if it's all right, because I think what you said just there is a bit of an answer to a good question from, who is it? It was Amina, who asked about how do we know if donors might be getting fatigued with being asked too frequently. And I think what you were touching on there is, with a system in place, you can keep track of what people have recently done or what they've recently been asked about, so that you're reflecting that in your comms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not a one size fits all for sure. There might be certain types of donors that you do reach out to more regularly, but ensuring that, if they then do provide some sort of support or perhaps engagement elsewhere in your organization, that they kind of, things adjust to what kind of segment of your audience you're kind of seeing them sit in. So maybe I was previously talking to someone about donors, but then they, got in touch to say, actually, I'd like to do some volunteering. So you might think, actually, we'll make sure we drop you off there. So yeah, I think that's a really super important piece. Also giving people the opportunity to opt out. So, you have to be able to give people that option to click through and opt out of, certain marketing content, and making sure that that feeds straight back into wherever that data is being stored, so that that is honoured and acknowledged. Because I think that's the easiest way to kind of lose engagement, is by not kind of honouring supporters in what they're asking for, which is usually because the charity just wasn't aware, not because they didn't want to.
Great. I've spotted another question from Jane in chat, but I just want to come back to Neil, because I think, Neil, you referenced a couple of things there. Charity Excellence Framework and ChatGPT. I wondered if you want to very quickly say something about them, so people know a bit more about them.
Yeah.
Before we come back to Jane's question in a few minutes.
So I think some of the so-called AI tools and so forth, if you take out all the buzzwords or whatever, I think one of the things I would encourage is everyone to have a go at using ChatGPT, and that is a huge workflow for small charities, because you can be doing, you can actually literally write responses to donors, you can write copy for advertising, you can do blog writing, etc. It is very, very powerful, and it's free. So I think that's something that I would encourage people to try, and then you could use it for your workflow of any of the things that you do day to day. That will save you a huge amount of time. So that was one of the things that I would encourage people to do. Charity Excellence, again, is a free portal for all kinds of things, not just fundraising. It's governance and some of the things you talked about, fundraising rules, etc. Ian does a brilliant job on that side. So that's freely available. And I think in terms of AI in general, I think it can be expanded into all kinds of things that I don't want to get into. I'm a technologist, we're trying to productize it so that it becomes not technical. So you can actually create videos, and you can create images. You can do lots of these things, but that's kind of probably beyond the scope in terms of what we're talking about today for small charities. So yeah, one of the things I would really encourage is get engaged in bite size, in how your workflow works with ChatGPT, for example, or whatever. There are other versions of that. Microsoft have their own Edge, etc., etc. But everyone has heard about ChatGPT. I would say encourage, have a go, basically, or whatever. From that point of view, I'm dyslexic. I can't write sometimes or whatever, but I've written blogs that I've never thought I would ever be able to write, basically. So I'm just giving an example of the ability. It gives you the tool to really do a lot of the things that we are talking about here, which is time poor. Most of the charities are firefighting. Here is a tool that saves you probably 80% of your time in being able to execute a particular piece of work. And be useful. That's probably my advice for it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're very nearly out of time, so we may not have time to do justice to Dane's question in chat, which is about, should you build a donor list before going to a subscription? My kind of hot take on it, just to kind of give us a quick go at an answer, would be, with a tool like Stripe, you could probably switch on a subscription option later. So it might be best to go up to begin with a kind of one-off ask. And then, as Lauren was saying, once you start to see a pattern of response, you can maybe get a feel for whether that's something your audience might be interested in. It's been really useful. Neil, there's been a request for your slide deck. So we've got people's contact details. So what we can do is we can pass on information from both Lauren and Neil and just say thanks so much for their insight and participation today. It's been great to hear from them, and thank you for the discussion. I think in the chat there's been loads of discussion and interesting stuff going on as well, so thank you all for being so engaged with that, and it's been great to see you all today. Thanks very much for the discussion.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ross. Thanks
Thank you for having us.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.